Great to have everybody. If you're tuning into this later, man, appreciate you guys showing up. Ops Experts Club. I'm pretty excited about today's topics. I mean, part of that is because Taryn's going to finally let me talk again. I mean, he's kind of just been taking over lately and just been doing right by you guys. And I hope you guys enjoyed KPIs and all the cool stuff that Taryn covered last week. Taryn, thanks for doing that so well. Do you have
You're welcome.
any follow-up thoughts from KPIs that you just want to tell people you've been ruminating on since you made such an incredible presentation?
I just want you to know that I go to bed thinking about numbers, just like nice visual linear rows, numbers getting better, not worse.
I love it. That's the magic, folks. You want to know what the magic is inside of Taryn Turner's brain? Go to bed thinking about your KPI.
When I close my eyes, the back of my eyelids is just a Google sheet.
I love that. It's awesome. Well, hey, we've been having some fun inside of different L10s this week. It was awesome seeing Kimberly at Rainmakers. We had a good L10 this past week. I know, Ben, you've been doing some L10s with Daryl, right? L10ing it up.
Yep.
And is he as much of a handful as he is for me when I work out with him? Like, how's that go? I mean, does it go okay? Are you doing all right?
I think the energy just rubs off of you and just flows into our L10.
I just want to apologize. I want to apologize because I feel like I kind of provoke him all the way up. And then I'm like, here you go, Ben. I hope that goes good.
Hey, Daryl, let me push all of your buttons while we're working out. Okay, have a good meeting.
There you go. There you go. Especially the timely one, because Daryl always busts my balls about being late to show up to work out. And so I'll always try and cheat him into being late for you guys. And so then it gets him super pumped up that he's running late and he's going to come and have to tell you he's running late. So we have some fun about it.
Hurtful. It's hurtful. Yeah.
It's not. Well, hey, we're going to pick up and kind of kick off into a new section this month for Processes 2.0. I hope you guys enjoyed coming out of People 2.0 this last month. And as we start a new month, we're going to start some new stuff. I'm pretty excited about it. And it's going to build pretty directly on the back of what Taryn had talked about when it came to metrics. You know, everything, we want things to be measured, right? Because I think as we talk to our people, as we're growing our businesses, if things start becoming more subjective, I feel like this, they feel like that, then that becomes really, really hard to dictate how you measure that when you come to evaluation time, right? You're like, oh, is that how you're feeling? Oh, well, this is how I'm feeling. And then it's like, okay, so do I get a raise? Do I not get a raise? Like, what's come my way? And I know Ben and I have been in some pretty interesting organizations where it was all dictated by feelings, you know, like where the top of the food chain gave out bonuses each year, wholly depending on what kind of day he had that day or had that week. Ben, you want to talk about that just for a minute? Because you experienced that firsthand.
Yeah. Bonuses, raises. We finally got to a point where the lower management and employees were structured out, but it still like upper and middle management was like, you're doing great. It's springtime. There's revenue coming in. You get a raise. And then like a raise again in 3 months, and the other people are going, wait, he got 2 raises this year. Why am I still at this point? And also, by the way, why is he making so much money?
That's right. I think that especially because, you know, the organization that we grabbed, Ben, sorry, I got distracted. Somebody's texting me about being in a meeting. The organization we got Ben out of was one where, you know, he was the top of the food chain, you know, and so he saw everybody's pay beneath him and he's like, wait a minute, like that guy's getting pretty close and he doesn't do half the stuff that I do. You know? But when you don't have a good metric method that you're moving from, I think it's always just that spot of, okay, so where are we at? And I think that if we don't give people a solid way of how we're measuring them, we can't really fault them when they don't perform. You know, Megan and I, my wife, will always have, we just came out of a challenge this last week for relationships. So you're going to get a bunch of relationship advice on this Ops Experts Club. But anyway, when Megan and I will talk about kids and disciplining kids, you know, as our kids were young growing up, Megan was the one that was always like, drop the hammer. They're like, nope, they did that, they get this. And I was always like, but did they understand? Like, did they understand that this was what was going to be measured out? And I kind of feel like that in business sometimes we'll discipline our people or we'll get bummed on our people I have a lot of good friends that are CEOs and leading really big companies that will come to me and they'll be like chipping their teeth about their people. But I know behind the scenes, and that is we didn't express those things to them. We didn't tell them that was the expectation. So of course they're not going to measure up to it, because how could they measure up to something that we haven't been playing about? And maybe you say, well, I told them that one time, or I explained it to them and they should know. Well, all that leads back to is like, and this hurts to say, and I don't say it lightly, but poor leadership. Like if we're not giving them good leadership and they don't know what the expectations are, how do they know if they're measuring up? And then you're getting frustrated because you verbalize something to them one time that doesn't have a good through line or good check-in points. And then you wonder why they're not getting it done, because you told them one time, probably pretty cryptically, probably a little bit distractedly when you told them, and then you're going to try and hold them accountable to it and then be pissed off when they're not showing up. And I think it's really good for all of us as leaders to have a real honest litmus test of ourselves of, but have I made that clear? Did I make that clear? Because if I didn't make them clear, how can I hold them accountable? And that's not like a condemnation on any of us. It's no, if you haven't made it clear, today's the day. And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about how we bring clear things to people that we're going to hold them accountable. And we would call those SOPs, or standard operating procedures. We're going to line out how you line out your processes so that you can give people frameworks to operate from, so that you can hold them accountable, so that when you get to your evaluations, you're rolling it all back up. So does that sound okay to everybody today?
Great.
I think so.
Awesome. Kimberly, I know you are like the queen. I just want to say this, like, mother of a bunch of kids, all at young ages. Like I'll see you comment on Slack. Hold on a second, I'll be right there. I'm changing a diaper. I just think like you and Savannah are both badass, high level, like where the rest of us don't. Well, Daryl is changing diapers still, but like me and Taryn and Ben aren't. Do you have anything to say about just SOPs and like frameworks? I know that you guys are building out all kinds of cool stuff within Rainmaker. Do you have any kind of comments? I know I just called you.
Yeah, like,
Heads up.
yeah, no, it's fine. Is it okay if I drop something in the chat just like for an inspo?
Sure, I love it. I mean, I called you out on it. You might as well throw me random stuff that I'm going to open up and not know what I'm going to put that.
All right, touche. So yeah, when I started in a leadership position in our company, I made that mistake that you just spelled out consistently. Like I would say something, I'm like, follow these people. Like, you know, I told them the thing, like go in Slack and put the check mark on it and go do it by the date. Like, but I didn't understand two things. Number one time is not enough. Like often things need to be said the same thing a couple different ways. And number two, you have to know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. We have one team that actually applied for an admin job, and they got into this other, we call them our support sisters, and they're amazing. And they were just like, they're on it. Like you send them that Slack message, they do the thing, they put the emoji, it's done, right? Like no more, we don't talk about it anymore. It's done. So I'm thinking, I'm doing pretty good, you know, like I'm a good leader. And then we get this other team and they applied for a call position. So naturally they love to talk. They're like Aaron, they're very eloquent and they speak well and they get their point across, right? But I'm wired a little bit differently. I'm over here with Taryn, like dreaming numbers and counting sheep, right? So my little brain was like, how do I get through to these folks? Like they want to come to a meeting and they want to talk. And we had these 1.5 hour long meetings and I'm like banging my head against the wall. I'm like, what do I do? Well, Elton's number one, that was my saving grace. That really helped that structure. So it's like, you got your place and time to like put these things. And then there was some retraining for weeks on like, awesome, add that to IDS. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. But when I finally, Stephen gave me like a 3-word answer. And when I finally, our CEO, when I finally understood that these people were talkers, they were wired differently. They needed to have a conversation about it. Then I could structure my ask in a different way. So maybe it comes through a voice message on Slack, or maybe it's like, hey, here's this thing I want us to do this week. I'm adding it to IDS so we can talk about it on Tuesday. And they know the expectations, like there's a thing coming, you're going to have a chance to talk about it and you're expected to do it this week. Yep. And those things really helped, but I did make I made all the rookie mistakes for sure. And this, by the way, I developed this, it's called I called it the mother of all SOPs because I wanted to empower. I was making SOPs, you guys, like faster than I was making cookies. Like SOPs are shooting out all over the place. And I was like, okay, I need to empower my teams to be able to create effective SOPs for everybody. So I got with another guy. He kind of like showed me the structure of their company and what they do, our marketing team dude. And so like this thing was birthed. And we now have a Monday board where team members can follow this SOP. They can submit it to the Monday board for review, and then we can kind of like implement it, file it away where it needs to go to empower or to equip the team.
I don't even want to show people yours because yours is going to be like, hey, whoa, like Kimberly is amazing. Like, okay, so don't get your hopes up too high. Like, it took Kimberly to get a time to get there, but she is a badass at what she does. Kimberly, you really did a great job. And I know it took a couple iterations, right? Because I feel like I saw you post a couple things around SOPs and I'm like, oh, that seems really robust. And then it seemed like you refined it down. This is the refined version, yeah?
For sure. Yeah, this is like 4 months in the making. And it says last updated November, but that's not true. I need to update the last updated number.
We know you well enough to know that Kimberly's updating always on the go. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here real quick. Kimberly, thanks for sharing. Ben,
That's awesome.
there's your Slido link, just so you know. If anybody wants a Slido link, if you've got questions as we're talking, drop them there. Kimberly, that was a great wind up. So thank you for helping me kind of tee that one up. Here's what I wanted to start with. So I would say when you are building out your SOPs, from my perspective, it always is going to start from your org chart. So this is just a simple example of Pedro's 100X org chart. We did some different colors to identify some different things. The new hires is the lighter colors here that you see that we were dreaming for. Some of the darker oranges is Collab Team, where we were operating in a fractional level where we were holding a spot until team was developed out. But the thing that I wanted to show you about this, so I would say it always starts with org chart. Like org chart your thing out, like see who should be answering to who. Otherwise, sometimes you can start creating SOPs, standard operating procedures, and hand them to the wrong people. But according to EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System, taken from the book Traction by Gino Wickman, from EOS's perspective on the org chart, every individual should have 3 to 5 key roles. And this particular org chart we developed out with that intent. So an example would be, we were raising up a community manager here. The main 3 responsibilities we wanted them to be focused on was policy and decisions for customer experience, retentions and refunds, and community management. Like that's their primary thing. So when it comes to what we want them to own, their SOP should be built around those 3 primary 3 to 5 rules. For Scott Benham, who was the product development and fulfillment creator or fulfillment manager at the time, he creates alongside the CEO, fleshing out details to vision, thinking through end-to-end delivery of products, crossover and customer journey, and then ownership of all bonus fulfillment. Like those are his 3 to 5 main duties. And you'll notice in some of them, like the sentences start getting long. You're like, is that really 3 to 5, or is that like 7 run-on sentence? You got to be careful of that because you want people to understand what's the gist of this role, and then it should like funnel down. So for this one here, as we were hiring this, and this is an old iteration, this isn't where things are at now, but the new hire here for the community manager was going to rattle down to Brent at the time, who was going to be the CE level 2, which was an extension of the manager, efficiency, macros and FAQs, and L1, level 1 duties and CRM crossover. That was going to be Brent. So like, as you're going through the org chart, you're laying out for people, what's the expectations from the role, and you're beginning to create for them a roadmap for how they should begin to craft their SOPs when it comes to the daily tasks tied to those different duties. So I'm going to take you guys through just a little tour on how we've lined out SOPs over time. And I'm going to start from basic and kind of grow it to more complex. Just know this, if you're watching later, if you're thinking these things through on your own, this is usually the most insecurity inspiring conversation I have with operations folks is, it's like walking into the closet. I always use this reference, but like walking into the closet of their bedroom, which just so you guys know, I always use this reference, but our closet is pretty clean. You're like taking them into like the inner sanctum of where nobody goes in your house. And you're like, I hope there aren't dirty clothes all over the floor. I hope everything's hung up. I hope this doesn't look like a train wreck. Like when you talk to operations-based people, it's usually the SOPs. They're like, hey, just so you know, and they always will start it this way. And I love them for it because I can predict what they're going to say next, but they'll also always start it this way. Hey, just as we start looking at this, just so you know, I haven't done the best job at lining out SOPs. That's like always the entrance into this conversation. And so just so you know, as you're watching this or as you're thinking these things through, if you don't have your SOPs fully fleshed out, that's usually like a next level within building out your organization. Usually you're still trying to determine like, what is my org chart? And do I have job descriptions for these people? And then from job descriptions, how am I doing my evaluations? And then from there, you start building out the SOPs that are tied back to some of these key places. So just so you guys know, I would also say I'm going to give you some goals at the end of this time together today. And that would be, even if you just gave the assignment out as one of your rocks for the quarter, hey, create 3 SOPs this quarter. Pretty easy, right? Like just 3. Don't start like, we have to SOP the entire company. Everybody has to know everything about everything they do. I want it all documented. Like, that's not even realistic, So just start with 3. Give out the simple assignment, SOP 3 of your core duties this quarter. And they don't even have to be your big ones. Although I'd probably recommend starting with some of your more key roles and responsibilities, but keep it simple, keep it easy. How do you eat an elephant, Taryn?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I'd say if it's your first round doing it, don't even start with your big ones. Start with easy ones. Start with things that'll help you follow the process and get you comfortable with the progress or the process. So then the next quarter, you can do your big ones and feel more comfortable with just the process of creating the SOPs.
That's good. That's really good. And I would even add one extra layer of simplicity to it. And I would say, do one that you're doing all the time so that you can just document it as you do it, right? Like, just write out your step-by-steps of what went into that process as you're executing it. That's the easiest way to create SOPs, because you're doing it, it's real time. So maybe it'll take you an extra 15 minutes to get the task done. But if you're documenting it while you do it, it also helps you identify real time. Like, is this working? Is this not working? That way you're not just pulling it out of your head, trying to remember the steps. So I'm going to give you guys some examples as we begin to build out SOPs. So simple to complex. I would say the place I always recommend people start is just start with something that you're doing consistently on your calendar. Start with a calendar. You can start with a calendar event even, or you can start with a Google Doc, like keeping it just simple. So this is the way I would do it. This is an old process that was in place. This isn't actually the process now, but when we first started running Bill.com for processing payroll for Pedro Adeo, it was really simple. And so I invited the ladies that I had in this, that I wanted to manage it as I was exiting it. So that's the nice thing about doing it from a calendar based. If it's something that's consistent, if you drop it into a calendar, drop what your expectations are and the assets down below, then you can just share that calendar invite with somebody and you can know that they've got it on their calendar and you can be checking in with them. Hey, did you get that done? Because it's on everybody's calendar. So that is one of the benefits of doing it super simple like this. But in this instance, it was review Bill.com inbox invoices, turn them into bills. Address any vendor confusion, which looks like a very simple line item, but actually takes a bit of time. And then double check your vendor list frequency of pay and send reminders if needed. Like, that's the process of executing payroll from Bill.com in a very simple way. And then I dropped in assets they're going to need to execute. Tools being, hey, here's some Bill.com tutorials in case you've forgotten, and here's the 100x vendor list. Simple, basic, not complex. So I think that's where I would always recommend to start. And then I would say once you get into a rhythm where your people start dropping in things like this, I would say you can always begin to migrate into complexity. Asana is a great tool. You'll see us talk about Asana a lot. The reason I love Asana so much is it's free and you can get a team of 15 into it before you ever have to start paying anything. Now, once you start paying, there's obviously a cost to it because you have to pay for all 15 of those players that you already been talking with and have in there. So it might choke you at first when you have to start paying for number 16, but I've also mastered the art of asking myself, does that person really still need to be part of my organization? Do I still need to seat on them? Because then you can really stretch 15 out a long time before you have to start paying. But when you have to start paying, I feel like usually you've ingrained it so deep into your culture that it makes sense to keep, So for us, we have all these teams over here to the left that are all built out within Asana. Those all represent different clients that we're doing different things for, that we have different things built out in Asana, be it tasks like what we're going to talk about today for SOPs, or Taryn assigning out projects to people. It makes it really nice when you can just begin to move to your project management tool to assign out projects and say, hey, I need you to start doing this at this cadence. Kimberly, like you mentioned, some sort of calendar reminder, like there's at this cadence, you're going to get this frequency of reminder and you're going to need it done. And you can see that here on these reoccurrings, like different reoccurrings that happen. It'll tell you if you're in overtime, or like if they're following a cadence, that little circular is just that it's reoccurring, or if it's just a one-off. So I'm going to show you a couple of SOPs, just simple ones within Collab Team that we use. So whenever I start somebody with the Collab Team, I'll kick this one off for myself. So I'll use this template and I'll come up here and this is the beauty of using something like an Asana, is that you can create iterations. So I'll come up here and I'll duplicate the task. And once I duplicate the task, then I'll rename it with the person's name. So let's say Taryn. Duplicate the task, and then drop Taryn's name into this section here where it says template. And then I'll assign it to myself, because the kickoff welcome to Collab Team is my job. I want to make sure I'm welcoming everybody in. And then I'll give myself a due date of when I want it completed. And then as you go down, these are all the steps that go into bringing somebody into the Collab Team. So send them the welcome email, edit and send the new contractor agreement, receive the new contractor agreement signed, create a Collab Team email, create a pay ledger and share it with them, invite the new Collab email to onboarding project in Asana, add to calendar invite and Zapier reminder, add to the roster, add to the Collab bandwidth, add to the 555 rotation. For me, those are all jobs that I'm going to do as I see things come back and forth. So, you know, like I'm looking for things before I execute next step. I'm not just going to send out a Collab email to somebody until I know I've got their contractor agreement signed. I don't want to give them the keys to the kingdom. For us, everything lives on Google Drive. So as soon as I give them a Collab email, they're going to have access to the drive. And I want to make sure they only have access once I have things signed. So you can create contingencies within it, but it gives you a very step-by-step. I'll go through check, 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 check. I've received all those different things. And maybe you noticed here when it comes to invite Collab email to onboarding project in Asana, I'll make sure whenever I'm sending somebody something from there on, they're receiving it at their Collab Team email address. That way, everything's in my controlled ecosystem. If I want to unplug access from somebody, if Ben and I also learned this the hard way in a different client of if somebody's using all Gmail, let's say Google, the Google G Suite's amazing because it's largely free at the beginning, you know, and so when you begin to use the G Suite, it's very, very easy for people to start using their own Gmail to create assets or to do things for your company. But then all those things are tied back to their Gmail account rather than your G Suite account, which is what we'd advocate for when you build your company out. So I'm only going to share things with people to their Collab Team email. So once they've signed it and I've created that form, then it moves on to this one. So this is what I send out to people when it comes to their starting at the Collab Team. And I'll do the very same thing. Come up here, I'll come into Asana, I'll duplicate the task, I'll rename it whatever their name is, Taryn, and then I'll assign it to them and I'll give them a due date, usually of about 2 weeks. I'll let them go through the onboarding process. Our onboarding process is pretty beefy. There's a lot of steps and sub-steps that I'm going to give them some time to consume, but I do want them to have an end date. And then what I'll do is like, I'll start them on Asana project management, you know, and you'll notice here in Asana, there are subtasks. So when you break that out, this is the primary task and these are the subtasks underneath it. And then sometimes there's even subtasks to subtasks. So going, Taryn, can you believe that? Subtask to subtasks? That's
Whoa.
whoa, Taryn's like, I don't even use subtasks. Anyway, so, which I will say, depending on how nerdy you get, I can get a little nerdy in my processes. Taryn's like, bro, keep it simple. Like, don't get process subtask to subtask. Sounds a little bit extreme. So then I'll just walk them through it. Hey, log into this, understand how you're going to receive the rest of your tasks as assigned to you. Log into your Collab Team email and create your signature. Log into Collab Team email and request access to the out of office calendar. Fill out the Collab Team profile form. How does pay work at the Collab Team? And then as you get into some of these, what I'll do is, you know, review pay info, watch the video, how do pay ledgers work, send Aaron an email requesting the ledger. There's some where I'm calling them out to action. Other ones where I'll drop in, what's a good one to show you guys? Documenting meeting notes. Nope, not a good one. Oh, I know how. Let's do this one. Ethos. So there are times where I'll say, hey, watch the intro video from Aaron in the task description above. Usually I've found if you'll give everybody all the assets in one clean, easy place, it's going to help them to execute your SOP. So view this video and here's the document. So watch this video from me. In that video, I'm reviewing this document. So then when they watch the video from me, they can click it as done. Spend 15 minutes reading through, reflecting on Collab Team ethos, this one here. And then comment below at Aaron the top 3 things that resonated most to you from the Collab ethos. So I'm asking them to do something back to me. So I think it's always good if you can have some kind of check and balance in some of the processes as you hand them out to people. This is onboarding. So of course there's going to be back and forth, but especially as you're committing something to somebody, it's nice to see some sort of progress being made, and then they have to do something back so you know it's being made so that you don't have to micromanage. Nobody likes to micromanage. Well, maybe some people do, but I would say nobody likes to be micromanaged, you know? And so I would say it's nice when you can covertly micromanage people. I mean, where it's like, I don't want to watch all the different steps, but I want to know when you hit step 3 that you're at step 3. Very easy way to do that is tuck in there something where they have to let you know something. That way, you know, they're moving through a process without having to say, hey, are you doing that? It just is moving through. So check and balances, I think, is really important. But I would say the thing I wanted to show you is step by step, include assets within your SOP. And then I would say clear directives if there's connections that need to be made with other people in the SOP. Taryn or Ben, do you have anything to speak to that before I go on to the next tool?
Well, I think this brings up a good point on kind of the difference of an SOP versus a process list, right? If you go back into the kickoff welcome to Collab template, let's say at some point you want to assign this out to an admin or something.
Yep.
They have the checklist of things to follow, but what if they get stuck on creating a collab email? They don't know how to create a collab email.
Yep.
So there still might need to be an SOP behind the task that shows them how to complete the task.
Good. Absolutely.
Maybe a subtask, Taryn.
A task to a subtask. Absolutely. Taryn, see, I just baited you in. Actually, though, it would probably go in here. And Taryn's right, because I created this one mostly for me, I didn't add in some of these things, but that's probably a great thing to add in your description if you didn't want to create a subtask. It's just when they get in here to create that in your description, you've lined out for them what that exact step means. That's a good point, Taryn. Ben, anything from your perspective? You've executed from a lot of things assigned to you in Asana. Like, I think you're probably the top executor from Asana tasks because you get it from all of us. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say just on the plus side too, especially as your organization grows, and if you're using like a G Suite or some other platform and your assets grow significantly, it's very nice to have something here like Asana where I can go, where was that video? Because I can't search through all of these shared with me in Google Drive or all the emails. I'm like, where's that freaking video at that Taryn sent me that showed me how to do this thing? I can just go back to the Asana task because I know it's going to live there. It's always going to live there, and it's going to be titled with the project that I'm doing versus me spending 15 minutes trying to search through the year of shared with me on Google Drive of like, what was that called? So just to have the access of having all of your assets in one spot, especially like in this case, if you're onboarding somebody and they're brand new in this world and they're like, what is all of this stuff? If you give them at least like a tiny home to live in to go, okay, all of the things I need, I can just go right back there. They're all in one spot. Huge difference maker. And it's a lot more efficient that way too.
I think the cool thing is about that. So there are a couple of different things that I'd advocate for if you are choosing a platform and you would go with Asana. The nice thing about Asana is its searchability is pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we've all used things where the searchability sucks, right? And we're like, how hard is this? I know it lives in here. So what are you telling me it's not here for? But I can, if I have questions about what I've given to Savannah, it's very easy for me to go in here and then everything for all time that I want to see that I've ever committed to Savannah, it's here. And if I want to refine it, or if I want to view it in a certain way, I can do it that way. If I said, I know I gave Savannah a project that had something to do with Google Drive at some point, I can look up her name, look up Drive, and I can see where she's at with that. The checkboxes are going to show me things that have been completed and things that aren't. So I think that there's cool searchability. Not that this is an Asana plug, but I would just say when it comes to how things work, the way that we use things, the way that we drive things within Collab Team, I think it makes it nice to use Asana for something like that. Another thing I would say along the lines of what Ben said was, if you ever need to remind somebody of like a new hire is struggling to remember to turn in their pay ledger on time, or they're turning in something wrong over and over again, I can push them back at an Asana task and say, hey, will you do me a favor and go back and watch the part of onboarding that talked about how pay works at Collab Team? All is one spot. It was already assigned to them. They go back to their Asana, they search pay, just like Ben said, and it comes up. They can watch it again, and I don't have to track down, where did I have that to send? How does that work? I think that it makes it really nice. So that's a really good one. Any questions on that before I move on to the next tool? Okay, let's keep moving. Another tool. So we talked about here's the simple. I would say this is the next level of complex. Next level of complex beyond that, and this would be a paid tool, and it's called Process Street. So The cool thing about Process Street, I think, if you're going to move to a paid solution that you're going to put money into, is that you can do a lot of tracking from here. So this is one of our clients that has a paid seat in Process Street. When you click in here, it's going to look very similar as far as, step by step. They're lining out their different details that you need to know as you go through each one. They're going to, drop in the assets. They're going to give you your step-by-step function of how this all works. The cool thing about Process Street is that you can run a workflow. So once you have got it all in there, they can go up here and hit run workflow, and it kicks off the process. And then they have to go step by step through it. And then when they tie it off, it says complete. And then the cool thing about that is that you're able to go into reporting and see what's recently been completed by who, so then that way, if you ever want to do some sort of process check on, has this been completed? Has it not been completed? Who's done what? Was that ran? It's nice to be able to have a place where reporting happens. So I would say something like Process Street is cool, where you start, like AYR has tons and tons of depth. Like here's like their library, they have all these different processes that they've built out, and they're trying to house it all in one central spot. This is where SOPs live. And then not only is this where SOPs lived, but this is where they're executed upon, and where I, as a manager, can come back and make sure my people are doing what I lined out for them, or if they're not. So if you're like in that spot where maybe you start something simple and you're like, hey, I don't need to get crazy. I have like one person working for me, or I've got 5 people working for me, or I would say even like 10 people working for me. At those points, I'd still say, hey, stay within tools that aren't going to cost you things. Like, because much beyond that, you're going to have to really start paying to get into tools. If you start paying to get into tools, I think Process Street is a good place to start, because then as managers are managing SOPs that are beneath them, they've got something they can come back to in reviews, or they can, if people get stuck, or it's just one central spot. Because I will say sometimes, like Ben was saying, when everything's kept on the drive, or, when all files, like even in Asana, typically your assets are going to live someplace other than Asana, because you're dropping them in via a link. So you're still going to have some kind of organization, like a cloud-based drive, like Google Drive. Sometimes Google Drive can get messy unless you're very, very intentional in naming conventions and who has access to what. And so it's sometimes nice when all of that can just live in a process-driven SOP collector like Process Street. Taryn, I know you've used it a little bit. Do you have any thoughts or something around a tool like a Process Street?
I enjoyed Process Street. It's got a lot of functions. So it was pretty simple to utilize, pretty simple to train people on. Everybody took it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, Daryl, to answer your question, I would say absolutely. It's almost identical to Asana, except so in Asana, just like I said, I'm kind of gaming the system, right? Like Asana was intended to be a project management tool. I'm also using it as like a task-oriented delivery system that you can do the same thing where you're repeating iterations, like I'm duplicating it. You can go back and see if that's done. But there's also probably a lot of other things that are happening in Asana that is like driving a project. Like we've got a big launch coming up this week, and there's going to be multiple different parts of that. And I want to see, hey, did the marketing go out, and did all the copy get written, and did all, there's different pieces of like a true project versus task. And so sometimes people can feel like, I want something where just my SOPs just live in one spot. And that's all that's happening over there. I'm not trying to manage projects. I'm not trying to see any other chatter that comes out of it. It's solely just around SOPs. Sometimes if you're in Asana a lot, Asana can get loud. I mean, there's people that are in projects and they're commenting on their projects, and you're wondering if things are done. And then you go into your inbox in Asana and the thing's a circus because there's so much stuff that's been going on in Asana. Sometimes if you're just trying to get back to, but did that SOP get done? You have to kind of dig. The nice thing about a Process Street is there's no digging. It's just one spot you're going to for it. So I would advocate for free until your SOPs start turning into a zoo. And then I would say, okay, maybe we should think about migrating these over to Asana or to Process Street. I think the coolest thing about documenting, though, because if you hear that and you're a bit like me, or like, hey, well, fast forward me to the end, what's the best? I know, Daryl, that's probably what your question is. I know that's where we get to a lot in your conversations. I would say don't fast forward to the best in this scenario, because I would say whatever you start on, even if you go back to something as simple as a Google Calendar invite where you're 1, 2, 3 stepping it out, the beauty is whenever you migrate to next, it's just copy and paste.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I move it into Asana, I'm just going to copy and paste these steps into Asana, and I'm going to drop all the assets there. And then if I want to move into Process Street, coolest thing is I'm just going to copy and paste from there into Process Street, but the most important thing is to document and not to get caught up in where am I documenting? Because I think otherwise you start paying into all these tools. I feel like the nemesis of a lot of online entrepreneurs, especially, is they buy all these tools and then their team doesn't even end up using half of them. But every month that recurring bill is hitting. Every month or annually, you're paying $1,000 for whatever that tool was. Smartsheet just kicked me in the groin yesterday with telling me if I wanted the functionality, I was going to have to upgrade. And now it's $1,000 to upgrade to Smartsheets solution. Taryn, you've seen me from the beginning of Smartsheets where I'm like, I'm not paying you $125 now. Man, I just had to bite the bullet on $1,000 yesterday for wanting this functionality because of the way we're using Smartsheets. So I think you want to be careful of how many tools you're embedding just for cost. So that was a long drawn out answer to your question. But any other thoughts or questions on this?
I didn't expect anything less than that long.
Oh, here we go. So then I would say next level of complexity would be sometimes your SOP is going to cross over into other people. And you might need to think about creating some sort of workflow that's going to show how the different SOPs speak to each other. So this is like a global process that we did for 100X for their coaching process, their certification process, where it starts, this is the kickoff, and then there's an external side where it affects customers, and there's an internal side where the team has to nurture something along. And so this is a spot where we tried to capture the SOP even within the workflow. You can do it simpler, and I'm going to show you that next. But in this one, this kicks off for the client, their final module is completed, and they get this type form to give us a response. But this kicks off a Slack notification, which then pushes to our first person that has duties to do. And they have these 1, 2, 3, 4 duties to do. And then they push out to the director and they push out to an understudy. And their steps are also listed in here. And then from there, it goes up here back to the client on this side of it after it's hit some check and balances. And then based upon how the director feels about it, either it's not approved, or if he does approve, it goes here, and then it finishes out the loop. So this just kind of shows a workflow of different people doing different things. Another way you might see it is, this is in Notion, but this is an HR styled SOP that came from here, where there are different swim lanes, where there's a hiring manager swim lane, there's a human resources swim lane, and then the new hire swim lane, where it's kind of documenting out, okay, so when we start this process, what happens? If I send out, like it starts here with whoever's hiring, lets HR know that this person's been hired. The HR person then needs to send a contract and then send to the new hire to complete the forms. And as they complete the forms, it comes back into the HR process where they file away those forms. And then this signed contract turns into a signed contract here, which leads to a send orientation email. So we're just showing the different transferring of hands. And then, like Taryn said, each one of those is just, you're giving them a task list, and then they're going to be SOPs that are attached to this. But I think that it shows everybody, hey, there are multiple contingencies within this workflow that are going to be assigned to different people. And I think that different people call this different things. Maybe for this particular one, maybe it's the employee journey. Where I say it's really important is on your customer journey, to be asking yourself, what are we sending people? What are we expecting for them to send back to us? And where does this cross over somewhere else downstream? Because especially in the online marketing space, entrepreneurs are notorious about adding to their stack, like their offer stack of what they're going to give. And then there's so many things in the offer stack that probably have conflicting pain points downstream. Hey, if we give them that, didn't we already give them that 2 iterations ago? And then what are we expecting them to do with that? And how does that really add to here? But the entrepreneur feels like, I'm giving them so much value. They're getting so much value with this, but like, yeah, but they don't know what to do with it. They're super overwhelmed with all this content you just dropped on them. And then all they're thinking about is their monthly payment they owe you next month. And they don't see the value because you haven't worked on your customer journey of how are they supposed to intersect with each one of those assets that are in your library that you just committed to them as they purchase. So I think it's really important. This shows kind of an employee journey. They enter here, there's implication, on them getting stuff back. There's implication on HR sending things out, even back to the hiring manager. And then the orientation steps are going to lead back up to the hiring manager needing to do some training. But we've thought through the journey and how it's going to intersect multiple people and the steps that are going to need to happen. And then from there, they're going to need to be SOPs built out, likely for most of these steps that at least are internal within the inside of the organization. So this one here is an example of, we've actually tucked the SOPs into each one of the steps. This one here is just more swim lanes, giving you tasks that SOPs are going to need to be driven from. Are there comments or questions around that? That was a lot to kind of tuck into just a few minutes worth of content.
Yeah, Ben, were you going to say something? I don't want to jump in front of you.
Go for it.
Okay. So I was just talking about this last night. We have a third-party company that largely manages like a huge leg of the business. And we have pipelines and go high level, and we have like lots of hands in there moving things around. And someone's like, hey, can I move a lead card to this thing? And I'm like, I'm not sure what the automations are that are attached to that. Hang on. Let me go ask third party. Third party's like, no, don't do that. Can't do that. You're gonna need a tag for that. And I'm like, a tag? No, we need a whole new column. So we put in a ticket. We request a new column. We request tagging for that. And then I'm just like going to bed thinking like, this ain't gonna work. Like, this is dangerous to have one person who knows the webbing behind all the automations and the triggers, and when you move this to happen, that, and it's up here. That's very dangerous, because you talk about kicking up dust. That's just a recipe for some dust kicking, like I don't know what. And so now, like I've been trying to just like go in my little dust can.
Can I just say that dust kicking sounds so rad with the Southern accent. So well done on that one. You stuck the landing on that. That was great. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm like trying to go around with my little dustpan, cleaning up all this dust, and I'm like, there's a better way. There's a better way. And so I just took a couple screenshots of that, because it's literally what I laid down last night thinking about. What I woke up this morning thinking, like, all right, how can I fix this? Like, how are we gonna flesh this out? And they're not gonna like it when I come over there and be like, knock, knock, knock. Can you like flow mat all that stuff out for me? They're not going to like that. And I think a lot of it too is because we don't know. Like, I don't even think they have something they're referencing, because you ask one person like, I don't know, let me go ask so-and-so. And he's like, yeah, I think that's connected to this. So probably not. And it's like, no, I need a flow chart like yesterday. So I appreciate that. That's inspiring. And I can use that as a visual to present to this team. And I'll try to use some of my Southern superpowers to win them over to the mapping out of, because there's a lot of stuff, you guys. Like, there's so many offers. There's so many different triggers. There's different levels. And we need to know who's getting what, when, and why, and what trigger is attached to that, and where, and what team is for real.
No, and I think Taryn, I mean, you're our resident architect. So maybe you want to speak to some of that, because I know that's like your jam. What Kimberly just lined out right there, I feel like that's where you live with a lot of the different clients that we've got. Maybe you want to talk about architecture for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem, and the problem I run into is nobody wants to take that info from me. If I'm building people's stuff, it's like, I've got all this intel. I want people to be able to know, but nobody wants to touch it. So there was no Kimberly there who's like, all right, it's time. We need to know this info. So it can go both ways too. It's like, people just don't want to know. They want to be able to follow the steps until Kimberly steps in and starts asking questions. And then they're like, okay, we're ready for a flow chart. But yeah, it's a good idea. You got to line out the steps. If you do this, what happens? If you do this, what happens? Here are the things you can do. Here are the things you can't do. What are the implications? Who's affected? What happens downstream? And I'm always telling people, if in doubt, just test it out, run yourself through it, do it to yourself, plug yourself in, like plug in your own things, do it to you, just you, and see what happens. And then for sure.
Use a new email. like a new email that doesn't have access levels, like so start. And I mean, one of the coolest things that if you are on G Suite, and I think probably not only G Suite does this, but like add a plus number on the back side of your name, you know, so Aaron H plus 15 at the Collab team is going to kick off a new profile. So that
yeah, it's a CRM wide hack. So it's just part of CRMs. They read that plus and they understand that to set you up as a new contact, but when they're actually sending the email to you, it gets removed and it sends to your regular email.
Yeah. So
it works for any email.
So then only my Aaron H is going to see as a first-time virgin user of this new tool that Steven's releasing, even if I've gotten all of his stuff and I'm a premier buyer, by adding that in, it kicks me off as a new one and I can start seeing access levels based on that. And so it's cool because you can test stuff. And I would say that's always Taryn is like, I just gave him this compliment yesterday, and so I'll give him in front of everybody, is Taryn's one of the best people I've ever seen at quality control of asking, hey, wait, wait. I know you're excited about this. I know Visionary at the top is excited about this. Like, let's ask ourselves, what's the implications? If we do that here, what does that break downstream and what are the implications? And has anybody test drove that? Did anybody go to that funnel? Did anybody go all the way through it? Did they quality control it, make sure all the copies right? Do they make sure that the links are going to the right spot? When you hit that link, is the tag been set up to that for that purchase, that it's going to kick off the right sequencing on the back of that? Is there any collateralized damage that could come out of that? It's going to give them access to things that we don't want them to have access to, that they purchased at the wrong level. So I think just thinking through what the workflow is, and Kimberly, you might be surprised. So I would say two different things. You might want to take a stab at it first before you even go back to the third party and say, this is my understanding of what the workflow looks like. Lucidchart's a free tool. You can use that one. Like, go in there and like try it out. This is what I think that the flow looks like. Is that how it works on your end? Sometimes that really helps like a tech person to see, oh, this person's putting time in it. They're not just tasking me out with another thing they want me to do. They've put the mind space into it. But I think also, Taryn, wouldn't you say the nice thing about some CRMs, all CRMs should have it, is that there is some kind of architecture already built in there, like that they should be able to screenshot for Kimberly and say, hey, when they enter in with this tag, this is the way the different flows work based upon access points given, emails sent out. So they probably already have some sort of workflow drawn out architecture wise that's going to come out of whatever they're creating in, that they can screenshot and send you and say, this is way, and maybe they're just doing a Loom video and walking you through what the steps are, but then they can show you that without having to draw it all out. Maybe Taryn, if you want to speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, if you're using the CRMs with visual automation builders, then that is, but I assume in this situation, they're using some sort of back-end Zapier updates, moving things around. You do this, it does this, it affects all these other things. So in that situation, yeah, you are having to list out, okay, what other programs are being affected. That's
good. That's a good point. I mean, the pain in the ass is Zapier, right? Like, as far as it's a miracle working tool, but what Zap did we just break? Like, what did we just do? What did we just change? That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Any other questions around that topic? Otherwise, we can move over to Slido. Or Ben, Ben, did you have something that you had wanted to add to that?
No, I would just add that, I mean, it's good to draw it out even just for your customer journey on what holes you have in your marketing and products you want to purchase. I mean, even like me and Daryl talked about a couple of weeks ago, like how do you get, even if you have a brick and mortar, like how do I want my customer to get in my door, and how do I want them to see me? How do I want them, if I'm on Facebook, what does that look like for them to be on Facebook in their office bathroom because they're on a break, to now being at my location Saturday morning? What does that journey look like? And drawing that out helps a lot. Well, they see me on Facebook, they see something I posted, that post has a link to my funnel or my website. They go to my website. Okay, what do they do from there? They click on a registration. Okay, where does that send them? Even that can poke holes in your customer journey on, okay, maybe I should add in a marketing email here. Maybe I should add in a follow-up here. Maybe I should add this product because they seem interested in my Facebook post about X. Even just drawing that out for how you're reaching your customers can show you where you can collateralize your marketing, additional products, stuff like that.
I think the cool thing about a customer journey as well is you begin to see, am I only ever pitching to my people, or do I give them some good quality content that I'm not asking them to give me money for? You know what I mean? Like, I think that that's something that we all need to ask ourselves is like, nobody likes just getting pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched. And you're really excited it's your new thing, but they're thinking, bro, I've gotten so many emails from you over the last week. I don't even realize this is your new thing and you're excited about it because I've gotten so much communication from you. So like trying to identify ways that you are communicating some sort of cadence and where you're offering some value back to them without exchange of cash. I think that really goes a long way. I know we just picked up a client who rarely ever pitches to his list. And his John Acuff, who's a New York Times bestseller, and he wrote the book, Soundtracks is the most recent one, beautiful book. If you guys haven't checked that out, what an edifying piece of literature that thing is. The audiobook, he read it himself, it was beautiful. But when Taryn and I got inside of his CRM, we're like, holy cow, look at his open rate. You know, like if you inundate your list, if you fatigue your list, your open rate, is pretty low. People aren't even opening your stuff anymore. But John's was at like 47% or some crazy kind of high opening rate. And I was like, holy, we never see that high of an open rate, but it's because John gives out so much quality content and rarely pitches. So people always open up his stuff and read. So when it comes to making a strategic pitch, he knows he's going to get that open rate and get eyeballs on what his offer is, which there's a beauty to.
Mhm.